A wagon wheel creaks through Arizona's scorched desert, dragging Tahan Greyhawk, an Apache warrior, toward a brutal fate. Ropes biting flesh, blood staining sand. In 1885, justice is a lie told by cruel men. Yet, a child's defiance sparks a tale of survival and redemption, where broken bonds forge new beginnings. Will a shattered wheel free a man's soul or bind him forever? Unravel this story of courage and truth. Subscribe to hear more tales of hearts tested by fire and dust. Share where you're listening from. Let the frontier know your voice. Stay until the end. Secrets whispered in the desert await. Beneath the merciless Arizona sun of 1885, a wagon wheel groaned, its splintered wood grinding over cracked earth, dragging a man toward death. Tahan Greyhawk, an Apache warrior, hung bound to its rim, ropes cutting into his chest like viper's fangs. Blood seeped from his bronze skin, pooling in the dust, each drop a silent scream. The wheel lurched, driven by 5 bounty hunters whose laughter sliced the air sharper than their spurs. "Roll him till he breaks," growled Caleb Holt, their leader, his face scarred like the Badlands. His boot slammed the wheel, sending it spinning faster, Tahan's body twisting with every jolt, his dark eyes fierce but flickering with pain. The desert stretched endlessly, a furnace of red sand and saguaro spines glinting like knives. Heat shimmered, warping the horizon where vultures circled, patient as fate. The hunters' horses snorted, hooves stomping the parched ground, kicking up clouds that stung Tahan's wounds. "This is white man's justice, savage," one jeered, spitting tobacco juice that sizzled on a rock. Tahan's lips stayed shut, his breath ragged but defiant, his thoughts drifting to the mesas where his people once stood free. He'd fought for that land, killed for it, not out of hate, but because the earth was all they had left. From a sagebrush-covered ridge, a shadow stirred. Lucy McKenna, 10 years old, crouched low, her green eyes burning through the dust. Her black and white dress, torn at the hem, clung to her small frame, and her father's oversized cowboy hat shaded a face too young for such rage. In her hand, a dagger, her father's last gift before the Apache wars claimed him, gleamed like a shard of starlight. She watched Tahan, his blood painting the sand, his hands clawing at the ropes. The wheel teetered toward a jagged slope, its groan a death knell. "Faster!" Caleb barked, shoving the wheel again. It gained speed, rocks crunching beneath its weight. Tahan's head lolled, his vision blurring as the world spun. Sky, sand, sky again. The hunters' laughter drowned out the wind's howl, their voices a chorus of cruelty. "Bet he don't last the hill," another shouted, drawing his pistol for sport. The slope loomed, a descent into broken stone that would crush bone to dust. Tahan braced, whispering a prayer to Usan, the Apache creator, his voice a dry rasp, lost in the gale. Lucy moved before fear could chain her. She slid down the ridge, boots skidding, hair flying like a raven's wing. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice a spark in the desert's roar. The hunter spun, startled, as she hit the ground running, dagger flashing. She reached the wheel just as it tilted, its edge catching a rock. Kneeling in the sand, she hacked at the ropes binding Tahan's wrists. The blade bit deep, slicing her palm, blood mingling with his. A rope snapped, then another, the tension giving way like a held breath. The wheel lurched, collapsing half over, Tahan rolling free into the dirt. He gasped, chest heaving, his shoulder torn where a rope had ripped skin. Lucy knelt beside him, her small hands trembling but unyielding, the dagger still clutched tight. "Get up!" she hissed, her eyes darting to the hunters. Caleb's face darkened, his hand snapping to his revolver. "You little rat!" he roared, raising the gun. A shot cracked, the bullet grazing Tahan's shoulder, spraying blood across the sand like spilled wine. Tahan lunged, pulling Lucy behind a boulder as another shot split the air. Bullets pinged off stone, the hunter's shouts echoing like coyotes at dusk. He pressed her down, shielding her with his body, his wound burning but ignored. Her eyes met his. Wide, wild, not with fear, but with fire. A child, a stranger, had risked death for him. Tahan's heart pounded, not from the gunfire, but from her gaze, raw and unyielding, like the land itself refusing to break. "Why?" he rasped, voice barely a whisper. She didn't answer, only gripped her dagger tighter, blood dripping from her hand. The hunters advanced, boots crunching, their shadows long and twisted in the dying light. Tahan scanned the terrain, open desert, no cover but the boulder. He could run, leave her, save himself. But her eyes held him, fierce as a hawk's, daring him to stay. He nodded once, sharply, and pulled her to her feet. "Run," he said, pointing to a gully where cottonwoods stood like skeletal guards. Together, they fled, the wheel lying broken in the dust, its groan silenced, but the hunt just begun. The gully's shadows swallowed Tahan Greyhawk and Lucy McKenna as they stumbled through Arizona's dusk, the desert air thick with the tang of blood and sagebrush. Tahan's shoulder burned, the bullets graze a pulsing wound, but he gripped Lucy's wrist, pulling her through tangled mesquite and cracked earth toward refuge. Behind them, the bounty hunters' shouts faded, their gunfire now just echoes in the wind-whipped canyon. Cottonwoods loomed ahead, their skeletal branches clawing at a sky bruised purple. Tahan's breath rasped, his strength ebbing, but Lucy's fierce tug urged him onward, her small frame a spark of defiance against the gathering dark. Beneath the cottonwoods, a sagging farmhouse stood, its weathered planks silvered by moonlight. Lucy pounded on the door, her bloodied hand smearing the wood. "Mama, open it!" she gasped, her voice sharp as a flint's edge. The door creaked wide, revealing Eliza McKenna, a widow carved hollow by grief, her eyes wide with dread at the sight of her daughter beside a bleeding Apache warrior. "Lucy, what have you done?" she whispered, her voice a dry leaf trembling in the wind. Tahan swayed, his vision blurring, the world tilting like a broken wheel. He collapsed into the dirt, his blood pooling black in the starlight. Eliza froze, her calloused hands clutching the doorframe. Arizona in 1885 was no place for mercy. Sheltering an Apache meant a noose for her and Lucy. Yet her daughter's eyes, green as river jade, burned with a plea she couldn't ignore. "He's dying, Mama," Lucy said, kneeling beside Tahan, her dagger still clutched, its blade dark with their mingled blood. "They ain't justice, they're murderers." Eliza's jaw tightened, memories of her husband's death in the Apache wars clawing at her heart. She'd stood silent when soldiers burned villages. She wouldn't again. "Get him inside," she said, voice low as a storm's rumble. They dragged Tahan across the threshold, his weight heavy as sin, and down a trapdoor into a root cellar beneath the floorboards. The air was cool, thick with the scent of earth and moldy grain. Eliza lit a lantern, its flicker casting jagged shadows on the dirt walls. She tore strips from an old petticoat, her hand steady despite the fear gnawing her bones. Tahan groaned as she cleaned his wound, the bullet's path shallow but raw, blood crusting like rust on iron. Lucy hovered, passing needle and thread, her small face set hard as canyon stone. Outside, the wind carried the distant whinny of horses, the hunters circling closer. Eliza's hands shook as she stitched Tahan's flesh, each pull of the needle a silent prayer. "Why'd you do it, girl?" she asked Lucy, not looking up. Lucy's voice was steady, too old for her years. He was tied to a wheel, Mama, like an animal. Pa taught me better than to watch a man die like that. Eliza paused, the needle hovering. Her husband's face flashed in her mind, his smile, his blood on the sand. She nodded once, tying off the thread. Tahan stirred, his eyes opening, dark as obsidian, catching the lantern's glow. He spoke, voice rough as gravel. "You risk death for me." "Why?" Eliza met his gaze, her own eyes heavy with guilt. "Because I stayed quiet once, watched your people burn, not again." Lucy, sitting cross-legged, clutched her dagger like a talisman. "I saw your eyes," she said to Tahan. "You weren't going to give up. Neither was I." His lips twitched, not a smile, but a flicker of something human, something he'd thought lost in the wars. The cellar grew still, save for the creak of floorboards above and the wind's low moan. Eliza doused the lantern, plunging them into darkness as hooves thumped outside, closer now. "They're coming," she whispered, grabbing her husband's old rifle from a corner. Tahan tried to rise, but pain pinned him down. "Stay low," he rasped, his hand brushing Lucy's arm. "You saved me. Now I owe you." Lucy's eyes glinted in the dark, fierce as a hawk's. "You don't owe me nothing. Just don't die." Eliza climbed to the main room, rifle in hand, and peered through a cracked shutter. Lanterns bobbed in the distance, the hunters' voices sharp with whiskey and spite. Caleb Holt's growl cut through. "Find that savage, or we burn this place to ash." Eliza's heart pounded, but Lucy's hand found hers, small but steady. Tahan's voice rose from the cellar, low and firm. "If they come, I face them, not you." Eliza shook her head, her resolve hardening like the desert earth. The night stretched taut, a bowstring ready to snap as the hunters' lanterns closed in, their light a promise of blood. The hunters' lanterns faded into the Arizona night, their threats swallowed by the desert's vast silence, leaving Eliza McKenna's farmhouse cloaked in uneasy calm. The root cellar's darkness clung like damp earth, its air heavy with the scent of blood and fear. Tahan Greyhawk lay on a makeshift pallet, his stitched shoulder throbbing, while Lucy McKenna's small hand rested near his, her dagger glinting faintly in the shadows. Above, Eliza's boots paced the floorboards, her rifle a silent sentinel by the door. The wind outside moaned like a warning, but for now, the hunters were gone, their pursuit stalled by the canyon's maze. Morning broke over Arizona in 1885, the sun clawing through a haze of dust, painting the farmhouse's sagging walls in hues of rust and gold. Tahan stirred, his strength returning like a slow tide, and climbed from the cellar, his movements quiet as a deer's. Eliza watched him, her eyes sharp as flint, torn between distrust and the weight of her choice to shelter him. Lucy, already awake, followed Tahan outside, her oversized hat casting a shadow like a vulture's wing. The desert stretched raw and unforgiving, saguaro cacti standing as sentinels over a land scarred by war and greed. Tahan knelt by a splintered fence post, his calloused hands working to mend it with twine and a bone-handled knife. His silence was not defiance, but focus, each knot a small defiance against the chaos that hunted him. Lucy mimicked him, her small fingers fumbling with a rope, her green eyes studying his every move. "How'd you learn to fix things like that?" she asked, voice sharp with curiosity. Tahan's gaze flicked to her, then back to the post. "My mother," he said, low as a desert breeze. "She taught me to make things whole before they break completely." Eliza emerged, carrying a bucket of water from a nearby creek, her face etched with lines deeper than the canyon's grooves. She set the bucket down, watching Tahan's hands. "You don't have to work," she said, her voice rough but not unkind. "You're hurt." Tahan shook his head, tying off the twine. A man who rests too long becomes a ghost. Eliza's lips tightened, her guilt a stone in her chest. She'd seen Apache villages burn, stood silent as soldiers justified it with talk of progress. Now, this man fixed her fence, his blood still fresh on her hands. Lucy, undeterred, tugged at Tahan's sleeve. "Show me something else," she said, holding up her dagger. He hesitated, then led her to a patch of sandy earth near the cottonwoods. With a stick, he drew tracks: coyote, rabbit, snake, teaching her to read the desert's secrets. "See the curve here?" he said, pointing to a faint mark. "That's a rattler. Step light or it claims you." Lucy nodded, her face serious as a preacher's, tracing the lines with her blade. Eliza watched from the porch, her rifle propped nearby, her heart caught between fear and a strange warmth. That night, under a sky thick with stars like scattered salt, Tahan sat by a small fire outside, its glow barely reaching the farmhouse's edges. Eliza joined him, her shawl tight against the chill. Lucy slept inside, her dagger under her pillow. "You didn't have to save her," Tahan said, staring into the flames. "Or me." Eliza's gaze dropped to the fire, its crackle a quiet confession. "I stayed quiet once," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Watched your people lose everything. My silence cost lives. I won't pay that price again." Tahan's eyes met hers, dark and unyielding, but softened by understanding. "I killed men," he said, "not for hate, but for land, for family. Now I have neither." The fire's embers pulsed, a heartbeat in the dark. Eliza's hands twisted in her lap. "Lucy's all I got left," she said. "She sees something in you, something I forgot to look for." Tahan nodded, his fingers tracing a scar on his wrist, a relic of older battles. "She sees truth," he said. "That's rare." Their words hung heavy, a bridge built from shared guilt and fragile trust. If this tale of broken fences and mended hearts stirs you, join us. Subscribe to hear more stories of souls forged in the desert's fire. Share your corner of the world, and let's walk this trail together. Dawn brought a new threat. Hoofbeats echoed faintly from the south, the hunter's persistence a shadow creeping closer. Tahan stood, scanning the horizon, his hand resting on a bow he'd crafted from cellar scraps. Eliza loaded her rifle, her movement steady but her eyes haunted. Lucy, awake now, clutched her dagger, her small frame rigid with resolve. "They're coming back," she said, not a question but a vow. Tahan's jaw tightened, his gaze fixed on the dust rising like smoke. "They hunt me," he said, "but I won't let them take you." The farmhouse stood quiet, a fragile sanctuary in a land that offered none, as the desert braced for blood. The desert held its breath as hoofbeats grew louder, a distant thunder rolling toward Eliza McKenna's farmhouse under Arizona's unforgiving dawn in 1885. Tahan Greyhawk stood rigid, his bow gripped tight, eyes locked on the dust cloud rising like a specter from the south. Lucy McKenna clutched her dagger, her small frame taut as a bowstring beside him. Eliza, rifle in hand, scanned the horizon from the porch, her face carved with resolve, the weight of her past sins fueling her stand. The hunters were coming, their hunger for blood a stain on the morning's pale light, and the fragile sanctuary of the farmhouse teetered on the edge of ruin. Caleb Holt's silhouette emerged first, his scarred face twisted with malice as he led 4 bounty hunters across the cracked earth. Their horses snorted, hooves churning red sand into a haze that burned the throat. "Hand over the savage!" Caleb bellowed, his voice a whip crack, revolver glinting in the sun like a rattlesnake's fang. Behind him, the hunters fanned out, rifles raised, their eyes gleaming with the promise of reward. The farmhouse stood exposed, its weathered planks no shield against lead. Tahan stepped forward, his bow lowered, but his gaze unyielding. "Take me," he said, voice steady as stone. "Leave the woman and child." Eliza's grip tightened on her rifle, her heart pounding like a war drum. "You don't get to decide," she snapped, stepping beside him, her shawl slipping to reveal shoulders squared for battle. Lucy darted to her mother's side, her dagger flashing, green eyes fierce as a mountain cat's. "They ain't taking nobody," she said, her voice small but sharp, cutting through the tension. Caleb laughed, a sound like gravel under boots. "A widow, a girl, and a redskin. This'll be quick." He raised his revolver, the barrel a dark eye fixed on Tahan. Before the shot could ring, Eliza fired. The rifle's roar split the air, and a hunter crumpled, blood blooming across his chest like a desert poppy. Chaos erupted. Bullets screamed, splintering the farmhouse's walls, glass shattering like broken promises. Tahan dove, tackling Lucy behind a water trough, his wounded shoulder screaming as he shielded her. A bullet grazed his arm, tearing flesh, but he held fast, whispering, "Stay down, little hawk." Lucy's fingers dug into his sleeve, her dagger pressed against her chest, her breath quick and fierce. Eliza stood her ground, reloading with hands steady as iron, firing again. Another hunter fell, his scream swallowed by the gunfire's thunder. Caleb charged, his revolver blazing, a bullet striking Eliza's side. She staggered, blood soaking her dress, but fired once more, clipping Caleb's shoulder. He cursed, stumbling, his men faltering as their leader bled. Tahan seized the moment, rising with his bow. An arrow flew, swift as a hawk, piercing a hunter's throat. The man gurgled, collapsing, his rifle clattering on the sand. Lucy broke free, hurling a rock at a hunter's head, stunning him long enough for Tahan to tackle him, his knife flashing in a brutal arc. The man's scream died as blood pooled beneath him. Only Caleb remained, his revolver still raised, eyes wild with rage. "You'll hang for this!" he snarled, aiming at Eliza. Lucy lunged, her dagger slashing his wrist, forcing the gun to drop. Caleb roared, backhanding her, sending her sprawling. Tahan charged, slamming him to the ground, fists pounding until Caleb lay still, bloodied but breathing. Eliza swayed, her rifle slipping as she clutched her side, blood streaming through her fingers. Lucy scrambled to her, sobbing, "Mama!" Eliza fell to her knees, pulling Lucy close, her voice a fading whisper. "Keep the truth, girl. Don't let them chain anyone again." Her eyes found Tahan, a plea in their depths. "Protect her," she gasped, then slumped, her breath gone, her body heavy in Lucy's arms. Tahan knelt beside them, his hand resting on Eliza's still heart, murmuring a prayer to Usen. "Guide her to the light, where no wheels turn." The desert fell silent, save for Lucy's choked sobs and the wind's low moan. 3 hunters lay dead, their blood soaking the earth like a sacrifice. Caleb and 1 other had fled, their horses' hoofbeats fading into the canyon's echo. Tahan lifted Eliza's body, carrying her to the shade of a saguaro, its white blooms stark against her bloodied dress. Lucy followed, her dagger clutched tight, her face streaked with dust and tears. The farmhouse stood scarred, its walls pocked with bullet holes, a testament to a fight no one had wanted, but none could avoid. The saguaro's white blooms stood sentinel over Eliza McKenna's body, their delicate petals stark against the blood-soaked earth as Arizona's dawn broke in a blaze of gold and ash. Tahan Greyhawk knelt beside her, his hand stained with her sacrifice, while Lucy McKenna clung to her mother's shawl, tears carving tracks through the dust on her face. The farmhouse behind them bore the scars of battle, bullet-pocked walls and shattered glass glinting like broken stars. The desert stretched silent, its red sands drinking the blood of the fallen hunters. But Caleb Holt's escape cast a shadow, his vow of vengeance a whisper in the wind. Under the rising sun of 1885, Lucy rose, her small frame trembling but unbowed, her father's dagger tucked into her belt. She gathered stones, piling them gently around her mother's body beneath the saguaro, each one a quiet prayer. Tahan watched, his wounded arm throbbing, his heart heavy with the debt he owed this child and her mother. He turned to the broken wagon wheel, its splintered rim lying in the dirt where the hunters had left it, a relic of cruelty now stilled. With his knife, he carved it apart, the wood cracking like bones under his blade, until it lay in pieces, no longer a tool of torment. Lucy looked up, her green eyes catching the light like river jade. "Why break it?" she asked, voice raw but steady. Tahan placed a fragment on the grave, its edge smoothed by his hands. "Wheels turn to crush," he said, low as a desert hymn. "This one stops here. For her." He murmured to Usan, the Apache creator, his words a breath on the wind. "Let the earth hold her, free of chains." Lucy nodded, her small hands adding a final stone, her grief a fire banked but burning. They worked in silence, digging a shallow grave with bare hands, the sand scraping their skin raw. Lucy's fingers bled, her nails splitting, but she didn't falter, her resolve as fierce as the sun overhead. Tahan wrapped Eliza's body in her shawl, laying her to rest beneath the saguaro's shade, the desert's guardian watching over her. Lucy placed her mother's locket, a tarnished silver heart, on the grave, whispering, "You kept the truth, Mama. I'll carry it now." Tahan stood back, his bow slung across his shoulder, his gaze tracing the horizon where Caleb's dust trail had vanished. By noon, the air shimmered with heat, the desert a furnace of cracked earth and thorn. Tahan gathered his few belongings, a water skin, a quiver of arrows, a carved bone amulet from his mother. Lucy watched, her hat tilted back, revealing a face older than her 10 years. "You're leaving," she said. Not a question but a fact, her voice sharp as flint. Tahan nodded, tying his bow to his belt. "The hunters will return. I draw them away. Keep you safe." Lucy's jaw tightened, her hand gripping her dagger. "I ain't afraid of them." Tahan knelt, meeting her gaze. "You're braver than most men I've known, little hawk," he said, his voice rough as sandstone. "But this land doesn't forgive. Live, and tell them an Apache was saved by a child's heart." He handed her the amulet, its smooth surface warm from his touch. "For strength," he said. Lucy took it, her fingers closing tight, a vow unspoken. She didn't cry, but her eyes held a storm, fierce and unyielding. He rose, turning toward the west, where the sun would sink into the mesa's embrace. His boots crunched on the sand, his shadow stretching long, a lone figure against the vastness. Lucy stood by the grave, the amulet pressed to her chest, watching until he crested a ridge and vanished, swallowed by the desert's haze. The wind stirred, carrying the cry of a distant hawk, its wings cutting the sky like a blade. Lucy tucked the dagger deeper into her belt, her resolve hardening like the canyon stone. Years later, whispers spread across Arizona's frontier. A young woman, Lucy McKenna, rode the plains, her cowboy hat worn low, a leather patch on her chest etched with a broken wheel. She guided Apache families and lost settlers past bounty hunters' traps, her dagger flashing in the starlight, her green eyes fierce with her mother's truth. The desert remembered her, its winds carrying tales of a girl who broke a wheel and built a legacy, where justice was no longer a chain, but a path to freedom. The desert winds carry the tale of Tahan and Lucy, a story of broken wheels and unbroken spirits. We hope their journey through Arizona's harsh sands stirred your heart, reminding you that that courage can bloom where chains once bound. Share your thoughts. What moved you in this tale of survival and truth? Your voice keeps these stories alive. With gratitude, we cherish your time spent riding these trails with us. Until we meet again, under the frontier's endless sky, keep the fire of hope burning. Join us for more tales where the heart defies the dust. Farewell, partners, until the next horizon calls.